What's up, everybody? Day one of closing arguments in the books. And boy, was it long. It's not common that in these types of criminal cases that you see days and days and days of closing arguments. So hopefully we get through it all tomorrow. There have been cases, usually they're like 6-month long drug cases, multiple defendants or whatever, where it can end up going days, but I don't think this one should take in 2 days. That's just me. But Waters decided to go into some detail and pick apart some things Alec Murdaugh said and go over some of the 99 financial crimes. And we're going to talk about that today. And we are going to discuss how compelling we thought it was. I'm sure there's going to be some disagreement in the chat, which is fine. I like when people say at this point someone is or is not biased because they feel like they have a strong conviction of guilt or not guilty. At this point, it doesn't make you biased. It just means that you may have been convinced, right? So I think we need to make sure we're using language appropriately. And it's okay to have been convinced at this point because the evidence is done. I would always encourage an open mind until you hear the closing arguments. But as lawyers say millions of times throughout trials, our words are not evidence. So if our words aren't evidence, then the evidence is all done. And it's okay if you've made up your mind at this point. So we will get to all that and more. I'm going to play a clip from his closing on sped up and probably not the entirety of the clip. I really don't want to watch it all again, if I'm being honest with you. Patrick Mott is gifting memberships. That's pretty awesome. Lily Beth said, your lunch closing argument swayed me towards guilty, LOL. Well, I mean, all I said were things that have come out in evidence. So I think that's perfectly fine. If the evidence does, in fact, sway you towards a decision, then that's fine. I think that, honestly, one of the things that was really interesting about this case in its entirety was how the lawyers from both sides were able to use the evidence. And that's why I'm really interested in how the defense is going to respond. And I said in a tweet that if I was the defense, I would have asked the judge for the last 30 or 45 minutes of the day, because sometimes they have been allowed to go until 5:30. I would have asked if I could start my closing argument. Now, there are differing opinions on this, and that's perfectly fine. But Creighton Waters spoke for hours today. So I would have liked to have taken 30 minutes, poked holes in his argument, responded to what he said, and almost split my closing up with a bit of a rebuttal at the end of the day today. And then my prepared closing of what we think our experts proved, what our evidence showed, even though we have no burden of proof, here is what we showed is more likely to have happened, which blows a hole through beyond a reasonable doubt. One of the things I wanted to do before we get started here, of course, like the video. We didn't get to 10,000 likes on yesterday's video for the first time in like a week. So let's see if we can get to 10,000 likes again, if you guys are still enjoying it. But I want to talk about what you thought about Creighton Waters' closing argument. And I want you to say A, B, C, D, or F. Grade his closing argument. What I felt about it overall was, if you were firmly in the guilty camp and you felt like he was guilty before we ever got to these closing arguments, then I think he absolutely solidified that. I think he gave you what you wanted. He talked about the timeline. He talked about the inconsistencies. He talked about the lies, why lie, things like that. And I think he gave you what you wanted. I think there is almost no way he pulled anybody from the not guilty camp into the guilty camp. I'm sure there's going to be people in the chat saying, oh no, he changed my mind. He pulled me over. It was so amazing, whatever. That's fine. And I'm not saying you're lying. That could absolutely be true. I shouldn't say nobody was pulled. I should say a very small minority, their minds were changed by this closing argument. I thought that there was nothing novel about it. There was nothing that I hadn't heard before. There was no new information. There was no great punchline. There was one quote that got me, and like was really gripping, and we'll get to that. But I felt like if you were in guilty camp, he did his job. He connected those dots. He gave you the information that you needed to when you were going to go back in that jury room and deliberate and say, this man is guilty. We must convict. He did it. And Creighton Waters gave you some ammunition to take back there and fight for what you believe is right. And that's important. And that is the main goal of closing arguments, especially if you're a prosecutor here. You want to arm the jurors that believe your theory of the case to go back there and argue it and try to sway some jurors that might not be leaders. A lot of times we talk about leader jurors and follower jurors. You can have some follower jurors that don't believe you that can be swayed by the leader jurors. So if Waters has some leader jurors, then I think he gave them what they needed to go and argue back in that jury room. And we've seen it happen before. We've talked to jurors after where they said, oh, there were 2 or 3 that wanted to give your client 0, or there were 2 or 3 that wanted to convict, but we convinced them with this or that or the other. Or your doctor said this, and we couldn't believe he said that. So we were like, oh, wow, that's really weird. But then we kind of dismissed it. But there were some people that really hung on to the fact that your doctor said that, or they thought your doctor was a jerk. And, got to worry about stuff like that. All right, scrolling through the grades. A, F, A, F. I love it. I love it. We are a chat room group, whatever, full of people that are watching the same exact closing argument. And there's not a lot of C's in here, I'll just tell you. There's a lot of A's and a lot of F's. A couple B's, a couple D's. F, F, D, F, F, B, A. There's our first C by Jilly Bean. A, C, 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 C. Okay, there are some C's. C, D, D, B plus A, D. So literally all over the map. The only consensus is there is no consensus as to how this chat, at least, feels like Creighton Waters' closing arguments went. Very interesting. Very interesting to me, and not surprising at all. Because, as I said, I felt like he was giving you what you wanted to hear if you were on his side, and you weren't going to buy it if you were not on his side. All right. So let's get into the actual content of his closing. So he kind of started it out with what I, as a lawyer, loved and thought was really compelling, that only Alec Murdaugh had the motive, means, and opportunity. However, I would have immediately gone into defining what that meant. He did throughout his closing argument, but that's kind of a legal phrase, motive, means, and opportunity. And I thought, though, like I said, with the rest of his argument, he did. But I love it because that's true, and that's a pretty compelling part of this case. He lives a lie. The storm was descending. He's a prominent figure who's never been held accountable. Prosecutors love to argue somebody feels like they are above the law. Whenever I had a doctor that was a criminal defendant, he's above the law because he's a doctor, because he's rich, because he thinks he knows more, whatever it is. They did that here. His financial troubles that, people thought went away with his big verdicts, but no. And I also liked how, and it was important and it was obvious what Waters was trying to do throughout the trial. This was not just about drugs. He had an insatiable greed for wealth and money. And it seems like they didn't live as extravagant of a lifestyle as they could have, or as like Tom Girardi or some of these other lawyers that are stealing money. But I think with how much money he was spending and making, you could easily make that argument and imply that based on some of the statements. But it just sounds better to a jury. This guy, he wasn't stealing for his family's medical bills. He wasn't stealing for anything, that was justifiable. He just was trying to feed his greed, baby. He is such a bad guy. He was stealing money from his clients. He was stealing money from that. He was lying about this, looking in people's eyes and lying. A lot of generally bad guy rule arguments throughout this closing. Every time accountability is at his door, he freaks out and does something wild, like this case and like the side of the road incident. Good connection there. We don't need to overcome every possible doubt. And he uses a picture and, he takes the picture and he says, look, if I do this and I have a doubt, you can still tell what that is. It's like, okay, yeah, that's fair. If I'm the defense, I'll say, okay, if I was going to tear a piece off for every possibility that the state's own witnesses said could have possibly happened in this case, tell me when I stop, because it could have been somebody that's 5'2". It could have been a shot from the back. It could have been a shot from the front. It could have been two shooters. It could have been one shooter. It could have been somebody tall. It could have been somebody short. It could have been at 8:49. It could have been at 9:05. It could have been at 9:06. It could have been at 10 o'clock. It could have been at 8 o'clock. Sled missed this. Sled missed that. I mean, you have so many things that you can say from the defense side to literally just tear that picture apart, and you would never know what the picture was of, but for somebody trying to force you to see it their way. It, to me, not a good presentation of what he was going for. He also said circumstantial evidence and direct, there's no difference. They're both just as important and should be weighed the same. It's like, yeah, except direct evidence is usually easier to convict somebody on. You can convict somebody on circumstantial evidence, but it's harder. Voluntary intoxication does not negate the crime. I thought that was really important because to me, that's like, duh, obviously I know that. But so many lay people have asked, well, could it have been like the drugs and he didn't know and he blacked out? Maybe he's going to make that argument. He would have had to have already let them know and put them on notice and put certain doctors up there to prove it. He didn't do that, but the prosecutor very smartly did not rely on the jury to just automatically know that. He didn't rely on the jury to automatically know that you would have had to put them on notice and have some kind of medical testimony. So instead, there's a jury instruction that says you can't say not guilty for that reason, that you think he was intoxicated, because it was voluntary. He was trained on how to put together these exact cases. I thought that was good. I almost laughed out loud when he said, listen, this motion to compel that Tinsley, pulled out of his coat pocket, we're not going to argue that it was guaranteed to be granted. It's like, good, because it wasn't. So that was even the prosecutor being like, I'm not so sure about that. He absolutely, though, when maybe he wasn't Tinsley's strongest backer there, the motive that Tinsley gave on the stand is the absolute best explanation for motive that the state has. By this happening to his family, he created sympathy. The civil case could have potentially gone away or taken whatever the last offer is, according to Tinsley, who's the lawyer handling the case, representing those clients and those victims. And that is the best motive. He wasn't getting any extra money from committing these murders. I mean, theoretically, he was trying to delay it, which only worked temporarily, I guess. The drugs made him paranoid, agitated, and energized. Use your common sense on that one. Good. Although I wouldn't have been so coy. I would have been like, I agree. He was agitated. Maybe something just made him snap and get mad. He was paranoid. Maybe he thought Maggie and Paul were on to him. And he was energized. 283 steps, cleaning up his mess. I probably would have just gone with the full punchline and not been as coy. 1,000 milligrams a day. And if he is watching YouTube, if he is looking at the chats, he would know so many of you thought that that was an absolute lie and there's no way he could be buying and taking that many pills a day. And instead of using it for some drug addiction or drug cartel or whatever, Waters used it just to say it's yet another lie. And he went through so many lies that Alec Murdaugh said on the stand. We are going to mention how many times he looked you in the eyes and lied. I thought was good. The dope wasn't the cause of his problems. I love when people of a certain age use the word dope. He lies about the kennel, of course. He went through his lies. He went through the financial crimes ad nauseum. Why? Okay, and again, this is when I think I would have streamlined it. Obviously, as you know, he did the opposite of streamlining it and tried to hit every single point. Why didn't he drive by or stop in the kennels and get out and talk to them versus texting them or calling them in 2023 is like the worst argument ever. Does it matter? Does it make somebody guilty or not guilty? No. But making a big deal out of the fact that he didn't drive out of his way over to the kennels and stop in on people that he just saw 4 minutes ago, as opposed to texting them, hey, I'm going to M's, or calling them or whatever, is like a total nothing burger. Sorry, I just had to point that out. Then he used a lot of quotes against him. Whoever did this thought about it for a really long time. At one point, Murdaugh says, but then at another point, it's some random vigilantes and nobody that we actually know and none of the victims from the boat crash case. Interesting. You know, even Alec Murdaugh is contradicting his own potential theories, which he's allowed to do as the defendant. And then he gets the consciousness of guilt, which wrapped in a lot of the inconsistencies and when Alec Murdaugh lied and why he lied. And we're going to watch some of this together. We're probably not going to watch the whole 16-minute clip, but we are going to watch some of it together. I'm going to put some of your interesting comments on the screen so we can kind of see what the chat is thinking here together.
Blanca Simpson said he was wearing like a polo shirt.
So first, let's just look at what's on the actual slide. 3 shirts and tried to get her to say a 4th shirt. I totally disagree with that. I totally disagree that he was trying to get her to say a 4th shirt. And I also don't understand how 3 or 4 shirts helps the prosecution. Who cares if he was wearing a different shirt at the beginning of the day? That theory never made sense to me, that Blanca actually saw him in one shirt, then he was in a different shirt in the Snapchat video, then he was in a 3rd shirt or 4th shirt or whatever. As long as we know he had that seafoam green shirt on at 7:45 on the Snapchat video, we know he changed before the murders or after the murders, depending on who you believe, into the white shirt and khaki/green shorts. So why the 3 or whatever? Again, I guess he's just trying to prove it is in fact a lie. Kennel video came out. He had to adapt. Never saw him again. Changes his shoes. Never saw the clothes again. Maggie says Alex wants me to come home. Marion says Alex wants me to come home. Alec disagrees with them. You know, Alec disagrees with all these witnesses basically and lies because he knows he's guilty is what he's getting at. But we'll watch some of it together.
When he left, wearing this shirt in the Vinnie Vine, she recognized both of those. He, of course, turned over the T-shirt that he was wearing when law enforcement arrived. And then you heard Blanca say he later tried to convince her that he was wearing a Vinnie Vine shirt. 3 shirts in one day, and the 4th one he tried to get Blanca to say. And you heard her testimony. She felt very uncomfortable by that. Multiple changes of shoes in the day. He wouldn't be wearing those shoes if he were out riding the property. I've already mentioned the text from Maggie that Alec wants me to come home, but he can't even be clear about that point because that doesn't fit with his narrative. Marion Proctor says the same thing, but he can't admit that because that doesn't fit with his narrative. She was surprised that Maggie didn't go along down meet him. And then she said, Alec made an interesting comment, one of many, some of which came from that stand that we'll talk about in a little bit. Whoever did this thought about it for a really long time. Why would he say that? Because he told you that it was just random vigilantes from the boat case of which there is no evidence whatsoever that you've seen in this record. Trials depend on evidence. There has to be evidence to make a decision. And his claims trying to manufacture something about the boat case, there's been no evidence whatsoever of any specific other individual. There has to be evidence to consider, not just mere allegations that have no basis in any sort of evidence.
Like, if you remember when he starts talking about how the shots happened, he's like, Alec shot Paul in the chest and he probably thought he was going to die and he didn't. And, you know, he was probably, you know, putting down the shotgun when he was going to pick up the AR for whatever reason. That's why he shot him from down there. It's like, okay, it's the first time we've heard anybody explain it like that. Like, how do you know where the AR was and that he was going to pick up the AR? It's like, to me, the prosecution is the one that has to kind of stretch some of the facts to go with their theory, as opposed to set it out specifically based on what the evidence shows, like the defense's demonstrative aid did. And I think that was their point, to show that it's kind of wild what your evidence actually shows. And that's why you don't want to put something together like that. You want it to be kind of vague and gray area and just pile on with a character assassination about how horrible of a dude Alec Murdaugh is, which you may be right about, but it doesn't necessarily make your evidence prove murder.
Whoever did this thought about it for a really long time. I think if you think about the defendant's statements and some of the things he says, a lot of times he says things in one context, but he means them in another. When he says things like, I hurt the ones I love the most.
And again, I knew as soon as that happened that he was going to use that in his closing. But it is totally, and again, that's the stuff that pisses me off when I'm sitting over there listening to the other side's close and they take things out of context like that. I'm writing it down. That's why and these are some of the things I would have gotten up and done if I was Griffin or Harpootlian, whoever's doing closing, before the close of the day today. I would have been like, He had his secretary, Alec Murdaugh's secretary, read one line from that text that he hurt the people closest to him because he wants you to believe that means his family. But in reality, he was talking about his employees that he wrote that text message to. That's who that text was to. That was not a text to his family. So that type of stuff is frustrating to me.
We talked about Shelley. After Randolph's funeral, he shows up early. She might have said Wednesday, but there was other information that Randolph's funeral was on Monday. But anyway, shows up in something blue, shows up early, wants to come in, goes and moves some vehicles. And then there's that raincoat. Huge raincoat.
Huge raincoat.
It's a huge raincoat.
Huge raincoat. Might as well be a tarp. Right?
It's had a GSR on the inside. It was found in a closet upstairs. Stakes 411.
Magical Mary. If we're at this point and the evidence is done and the state's done their first close and you're not convinced, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but the law would say you have to vote not guilty.
He was a busy guy in Alameda, as we just saw. He was moving around, kept hitting off of his Suburban. And then, of course, as you heard, he was with family for the next few days. After the funeral, he's back. And it was weird enough and interesting enough that Shelley said something about it. I'm also saying that in her experience, it was unusual for him to come that way. Then we have the defendant and his many statements. Went through a lot with the defendant, who told you that the reason why he was telling you this new story was because he was paranoid because he had bag of pills in his pocket, because he had a distrust of Sled, because David Owen asked him about his relationship with Maggie. And his law partners told him that he should have an attorney present, which one isn't here, one of his law partners sitting in the back.
I understand. I totally understand. So you don't have any problem with it.
I asked him repeatedly, is this the point where you decided to lie? At which point did you decide to lie?
I have to do this. I understand.
I'm going to do that twice.
Yeah, I didn't think this was that effective personally. Like, when did you decide to lie? Like, you proved your point. I think he belabored this point personally.
How my relationship was. This question, this is when he decided to lie?
Wonderful. I mean, I'm sure we had little things here and there, but we had a wonderful marriage, wonderful.
I'm going to save that one, Lynn.
But he digs in on the point.
What did you do today? Were you at the office or?
No, I was home. I came home, all that, messed around. I was up at the house. I laid down, took a nap on the couch, probably, I don't know, 25, 30 minutes. I got up, I called Maggie.
Pure lie, showing consciousness of guilt. I think that's a great point right there. He lied for that reason, and he would only be able to know that he needed to lie like that if he knew when they were killed. That's a great point to make by the prosecutor.
Didn't get an answer, and I left to go to my mom's. She'd said,
about such a crucial thing.
and she's very good about answering the phone, so that was odd, or calling me back. So that was odd, but it wasn't that big a deal.
It was odd, but not that big a deal. But again, he's enough to say it was odd. He's enough to make all those calls while he's doing 283 steps, but he doesn't drive 50 seconds down to the kennels. Going to the next interview. Again, what's the tone of this interview? How is he being treated?
Pretty traumatic.
That's okay. I know you need to ask me.
How is he being treated? Again, cops are nice in lots of interviews that they use against defendants. So how he's being treated is the wrong angle. The point he's already made is the important point. He's lying about something so important that he would only know he would have to lie about if he was the one that committed the murders and knew what times the murders were committed. Just stick to that, simplify it. Don't even allow a juror to do what I just did and say, oh, because the cop was being nice, you have to, say whatever the cop wants you to say, or you have to tell the truth to the cop or whatever. the cop's demeanor means nothing to me.
You asked me what I was mostly because of,
Gotcha.
what happened. I mean, I'm assuming Paul went to the kennels.
Okay.
I'm assuming Paul left
Okay.
because
So
of
here we go.
ready for those
And
things,
how easily he can say stuff like, "Oh, I'm assuming Paul left."
Mentions the case.
Paul left.
And I'm assuming, Paul left
Okay.
because of,
Gotcha.
what happened. I mean, I'm assuming Paul went to the kennels.
Okay. And what did you do once Maggie and Paul left?
I stayed in the house.
Okay.
And I was watching TV, looking at my phone, and I actually fell asleep on the couch.
Okay. And what time did you?
I don't know exactly what time I woke up, but when y'all get my phone, I think one of the first things I did when I got up was call Maggie because I was going to my mom's.
When you all get my phone, something I talked about kind of earlier is he spoke so much about knowing what data was coming, when it was coming. And that leads me to believe that's why his phone was put down for that hour. And he picks up that phone and he knew that that's when it was going to start tracking him again. That's the argument I would have made right there. I would have stopped it and said it. He made that kind of argument throughout, but I would have stopped it right there when he said that.
And I know I texted her because I checked my phone. And what time did we say the text was, Jim? It's like 9:06.
I didn't see it. Yeah, I got it written down for you.
I showed you the other night, didn't I?
Yes, sir. I got it.
So, I texted her. So I called her just before that.
Mhm.
And I mean, she didn't answer at that point. And I left to go to my mom's.
So easy for him to do.
And you said you laid down and took a little nap, and when you got up, Maggie and Paul was gone, or did they leave when you laid down?
I believe that. I'm not sure.
But they weren't there when you woke up around the 9 o'clock mark or so when you made your call to Maggie to let her know you wanted to.
No, nobody was in that house when I left.
Adding more detail, it's just lies. Watch how he responds to this one. Watch what his head does. See if you observe that yourself when he's over there looking you in your eyes and trying to convince you of something.
Trying to narrow that. The last time that you saw Paul and Maggie is when y'all were eating supper.
Yes, sir.
Nitpicking his head movements and comparing it to when he was on the stand. I mean, that's what you're going with here. That's my problem. Whatever. If you want to pick that apart, that's fine. And if your total closing argument was an hour and a half or 2 minutes long and you pick that nitpick, that's fine. But with all the stuff you want to talk about, you take time on that. That's just where I think it's like, man.
When Paul's phone came out, did you just pick it up and put it on, place it back down on him, or?
Yeah, I did not try to open it or anything. I don't know how I had in my mind that I needed to not mess anything up. I had that.
I want you to start interview on August 11th.
And after dinner, Maggie and Paul went to the kennels, or?
I don't know exactly how that went. I stayed on the couch and I dozed off.
Video on Paul's phone of you and him on the phone that night. And you were in khaki pants and a dress shirt. You were playing with a tree.
I don't remember playing with a tree.
Yeah. I guess there was a tree sapling or something that was falling over or bending over, and you were trying to get it to stand up. But I mean, the question of that is, when I met you that night, you were in shorts and a t-shirt. At what point in that evening did you change clothes?
I'm not sure.
Whenever it's something serious going on and I crack a smile, I've got to tell you what comments I looked at. Daria, Peter cares about us when he tears his golf magazine. And Deborah B says, Peter, I'm convinced it's still a golf magazine. That's a good point. That's a good point. They better make sure there's not a page behind it that still tells you what it is, right?
Right. It would have been.
Before dinner or after dinner?
That would have been. What time of day was that? I would have thought that had already changed.
There's not a timestamp on it because there's so many posts. But I want to say it looks to be about dusk. So that would have been 7:30, 8 o'clock.
I guess I changed when I got back to the house.
I had some very specific recollections for y'all when he testified with his new story that had never been heard until last week.
I find that not compelling. Like those types of pauses and sarcastic remarks, I just don't find that compelling personally. But a lot of people do.
He and Rogan Gibson told me about the dog's tail. Somebody saying his leg was broken.
Well, right there, he was down at the kennels, shaking his head forward.
You were just down there with Paul. You left. You went back to the house together.
You know, I mean, Paul and I were just knocking around up at the shop, the shed, the kennels, and you know, just the whole property. And that was before dinner yesterday.
And you didn't go back down there after dinner until your return trip from visiting your mother.
Yes, sir.
I've got information that Paul was on the phone and Maggie was heard in the background and you were heard in the background. And that was prior to 9 p.m.
I heard Rogan Gibson asking me if I was up there, and he said he thought it was me.
Was it you?
At 9 o'clock?
Yes.
No, sir. Not if my time's right.
Who do you think it could have been?
I have no idea.
And Rogan's been around your family for pretty much all his life.
Oh, absolutely.
And he recognizes your voice and you have a distinct voice. You think anybody else that has a voice over to yours that he may have misinterpreted?
No, sir. You know, we were talking, he had asked me that, so, I mean, he told me. He thought I was up there.
Did it surprise you?
Yes, sir.
All right. And that is the consciousness of guilt. I do have a clip. Some people are saying and asking about when they visited the scene that some law enforcement officers were there. I have no idea who was there. There shouldn't have been any witnesses or investigators or people involved in the case, but I have no idea who was there. It could have been influential if they said anything, did anything. I think the judge was there. So if anything improper would have happened, I think the judge would have called it out. But we can kind of speed through that as we're talking with the sound off to just kind of see what it looked like. And I can put some more comments on the screen and stuff at the end if we want to play that clip. You guys just let me know in the chat. All right. The defense expert refused to consider variables. That's what he said. All his little gray people that he had, running around doing these things. He explained how his experts were better, how the shots went through Paul and Maggie. Again, a lot of that to me, I wouldn't have focused on that. I wouldn't have taken the time to say the shot went in here, it entered here, exited there. What is that going to do to convince somebody Alec Murdaugh did it and Alec Murdaugh is guilty? I just wouldn't have focused on that. I don't find that, again, compelling. But the quote of the closing that gripped me the most and that I felt like I would have centered potentially my whole closing around is Maggie is running towards her baby. And I think Lynn, she was running towards her baby. That to me was the most gripping part of his closing argument, and building it around the emotion, I think, is the way to go when you have a case like this with somebody that was lying and somebody that didn't do what a loving father, at least according to most people's common sense, would have done. He didn't say, if I was only there longer, which is, stuff we talked about earlier in the day with the mock closing. He lied about smalls, blue lights in a private vehicle. He made a big deal about that, and I agree with him. That's wild, the amount of power and influence you have to get blue lights in your private vehicle. And no one knew who this man was. He avoided accountability his whole life, abused authority, lived on his family name. He wanted to protect his legacy, protect his family name. A lot of the stuff we've already talked about, he hit all those points. This was something I thought was a little bit weird. Some people didn't get to testify in this case because the eyewitnesses were murdered. They deserve a voice. Common sense testifies on their behalf. I've never heard that argument made before, specifically that common sense testifies on their behalf. I was like, I don't really know where we're going with that. All right, let's pause here and answer some questions, and then we'll just get back to a couple more comments of the first close, and we'll talk about rebuttal and things like that the rest of the video. Azam, Hey, Peter, why is there no time limit for the parties like JDVAH? Is it different for criminal cases, or is it up to the judge? It is up to the judge. Every judge can choose whether or not to limit, and this judge said he does not put limits on his courtroom on closing arguments. Janelle, the prosecution said the law makes absolutely no distinction between the weight or value to be given to either direct or circumstantial evidence. Is that true? I believe that is true. I haven't read that jury instruction in a long time, but that does not mean that jurors give it the same weight. It's just like witnesses. Every witness that testifies is technically evidence, but the juror can weigh their credibility and weigh whether or not it's powerful enough to sway their vote. Same thing with circumstantial versus direct evidence. If they don't feel like it's very credible or should be weighed very heavily because it's circumstantial, they're allowed to do that. Dark Arts by Adrian. Peter, so grateful for your daily analysis of this trial. Thank you for showing both sides of the Murdaugh story. You're illuminating the legal system to so many of us. Also, thank you for the incredible mock closing. Thank you. Freddie York. Waters argued for reasonable doubt. He said one shooter is just as likely as two shooters. How can he get past that? I don't remember him specifically saying that, but lots of what he said left reasonable doubt, just was all over the place in his closing, I felt. When he got to the actual murders, now when he was talking about Alec Murdaugh as a bad guy, he's done a lot of bad things, stole money, lied, beyond a shadow of a doubt. But when he started talking about the murders, I thought there was a lot of reasonable doubt there. Monica, I am just concerned the jury is so tired from the trial, they will hurry through deliberations and any not guilty votes will be easily swayed just to be done with it and to reach a verdict. Does that ever happen? Absolutely happens all the time, not even in long trials, not even when they're exhausted. They just want to get out of there. And I'm not just saying it happens the not guilty or the guilty way. It can happen the not guilty way too, where jurors are just like, get me out of here. I'll vote with whatever you guys want to vote. Nicole, sidebar chit chat was about a juror that said he's innocent, as well as a juror that was allowed to fully sleep during closing. Thoughts? You know, there's been discussions and research showing that can go either way. If they're sleeping, they made up their mind. If they're sleeping, it's good for the defense. Obviously, if somebody said he's innocent, that's good for the defense. It's wild. Asia, do you think it's for jurors arguing guilty to convince the not guilty ones, or jurors arguing not guilty to convince the guilty ones? Whatever a juror believes, if they're a leader and they're going to argue and they're with you, you want them arguing for you. If they're against you, you don't want them arguing against you. But no matter what side you're on, you're probably arguing to try to get your side to win. Mary Claire. Peter, does the jury need to explain the rationale for the individual votes? No. Sherry, super curious about what was going on and discussed in chambers. We'll never know. R-Dub. He made the timeline make sense for me for the first time today, but it wasn't quite enough to get beyond a reasonable doubt among others. Reasonable that someone from the internet hated Paul, not positive, but reasonable. I mean, even his timeline still left room for somebody else to do this while Alec Murdaugh was not there. And that's one of the issues. E.E. Khan, they said they knew the killer. Why couldn't it have been a family friend that knew guns and routine, someone finding out about the money issue and snaps? I mean, that doesn't seem like incredibly plausible. It seems possible. But I think that would even be kind of a far-fetched explanation. Not to say it's not true. Who does the AG answer to? What kind of heat do they get when hanging a jury? They are appointed. So an elected body appoints them. So the people basically can control. Tacoma Tough. Could the jury come back with a verdict of something less than what he's being charged with? I don't believe that's available in this case. And Bothwell, maybe. Or maybe. So they'll file an appeal if he's convicted. Are these grounds? And what is the probable length of sentence for the financial fraud? I've heard it's life without parole. And yes, they will file an appeal if he's convicted. And I think they have, as far as appellate cases go, they have a good chance, which is never a really good chance, but with the 404B, other acts evidence. Sky Ricky, why doesn't he say Maggie was a beloved daughter, mother, sister, and friend to many? She wasn't involved in the shenanigans. Why did he have to kill her? Because of his crimes. John O'Rourke, probably only a 20% or less of the people in the chat actually listened for the entire 8 hours. Too long. It was so long. It was so long. Keeley, how could he go into lethal amounts of drugs? He says he did, but it's up to people's common sense on the jury if they know better. Kayla, can the lawyers lie in their closing? Seems like he's definitely twisting the evidence testimony. They cannot lie ever in court. They are officers of the court. They have a duty to be honest and tell the truth and not commit fraud on the court. but twisting evidence in certain ways can toe the line. Amanda, hopefully Putin Jim counted the amount of time CW said probably. He served reasonable doubt on a platter. Jay, if he planned this for a long time, he must have had a crystal ball to have known his mom's caretaker was going to call him to stop by his mom's later because she's in bad shape. Well, Jay, don't you know? Anything that's good for the defense must be a lie. And Barbara Mixon must have lied, or Alec Murdaugh lied, or everybody had to lie in this case. And I'm just like, we don't do that in other cases. Deborah B., why would he need to call Maggie and Paul? He was just at the kennels with them. Wouldn't he have told them where he was going when he left? Maybe or maybe not. Like right now, if I'm going to go to the store, I'm not even going to walk upstairs. I'm going to text Whitney. Pumps Girl, if the boat accident was AM's motive, why? How would the family be on the hook for money if Paul was an adult at the time of the accident? He was sued personally and individually for this, but it doesn't make any sense. I mean, the boat case has been going on for 2 years. That does not make sense as a motive for me at all. And he's right. The chances of them actually getting it to dig into his finances at this point were slim to none. Bev Taylor, I can't stand that smug smirk on AM's face. Rebecca, if Paul is dead, then he can never be convicted of the boat incident. Correct. Clearing his name on that maybe, or in a way, potentially. But I mean, it seemed like Alec Murdaugh was fixated on proving his innocence. And a lot of his family members took the stand and said, it was bad what they did to Paul. It wasn't true. He didn't do that. Lucia, Waters is a sneak HBO comment pissed me off. He flat out lied. That interview was not filmed a couple months ago. Why is he lying about it? I agree. That was shady, but Alec Murdaugh knew and he pointed it out. Now, technically, he said that, in November of 2022, it was on a news station that his lawyer said this. It's technically true, I guess, but I agree. Dirty pool. John, doesn't longer closing equal more reasonable doubt, more holes? Not necessarily, but I wouldn't have done it. Deanna, Creighton doesn't know how to read an audience jury. I think he's probably done a lot of these. Jesse Sue, I wish I knew how to read lips. Alex had a lot to say during closing. Are you planning on looking into the Lindsay Clancy case? Can't say thank you enough for all you do. Thank you, Jesse Sue. I did look into it a little bit. We'll see. It's really sad. And that content is like, it's really brutal. I'm not sure. I haven't decided fully yet on that. Coach Debbie, Peter, you are far and away the most unbiased, fair commentator on this case. I appreciate you and your stellar content. They haven't proven their case. Thank you, Coach Debbie. Rashenda, they should have hired you to do the closing. Yours was much more efficient and got me back on the guilty side. They know the case a billion times better than I do. They know the jurisdiction a million times better than I do. They were plenty qualified to handle this. I think it's a really tough case with the evidence they were dealt. Janet, I've gone from not guilty to guilty to I'm not sure, so I'd have to vote not guilty. We have a defendant's life at stake. Prosecution never put the nail in the coffin. Kathy, CW misrepresented so much evidence. He is no better than AM with the lies. I don't know if I'd go that far. I hold him to a higher standard. Okay, not guilty. Gingy Probs, state's most egregious error, that dang PowerPoint. It wasn't good. It wasn't good, especially with the 20 lawyers they have working on the case. Like nobody could put together something better than that. We the jury, can you explain gifting memberships? Thanks, just curious about it. Honestly, I'm not a pro YouTuber or pro YouTube user or whatever. I don't even know how to gift memberships, but somebody else in the chat like Patrick or Nicole, they'll be able to maybe answer this question. Objection, hearsay. I would run towards my child no matter who was holding the gun or what danger lie in wait. I'm running towards my child. Samesies. Mama Pink. The fact that the mother's caregiver called at 4 because she was having a bad day and he didn't go then bugs me. Why do you wait till 9 p.m. to go? Alibi? Peter, your mock closing argument had me more convinced than Waters, Ashley said. Jay, maybe also, I'll just say this. Some of you maybe were convinced by mine because we have been talking a lot and I know what you guys focus on in the chat. So, you play to your audience, and maybe if Waters was watching, the jury, was more interested in certain things, maybe he hit more of those certain things than others. Pete, do you agree that both sides have been shady the whole time? I'm not going to say shady the whole time, Jay. I'm also going to miss our nightly healthy debates and hanging out with you and giving you my money for us to agree to disagree. Last, got my lemon perfect. Awesome, Jay. Well, there'll be other trials. There'll be other times for us to hang. I wouldn't say shady the whole time. I think both of them have towed the line with it, though. A lot. D. Marie, I've enjoyed your show. I like that you keep it real. It's like Real World, just 7 strangers when things stop getting right and start getting real or something like that. I can't remember how it goes. Stop being polite and stop getting real. Jamie, why does CW keep asking about when he decided to lie? I agree. I mean, we get it. He lied about when he decided to lie. Like, what does that prove? Just talk about how it shows that he knew the time of death and knew when he had to lie and what he had to lie about. That's the better argument. His argument is he manufactured an alibi, planned the decision to lie by CW's logic was a while ago. Sue, your favorite attorney, Meters, is doing rebuttal tomorrow. No. I thought it was Meadows was his name or whatever, but hey, I bet it's going to be entertaining. I bet it's not going to be boring. Sweet Tea, is he wearing the missing clothes to the second car interview? No, I can't keep track of what's in evidence or what's missing. No, it's a different shirt. Greg Hall Art, isn't it better to be real, concise, and closing? Thanks. I mean, you don't want to be too short. You want to be 5 minutes and leave important things out. But this was too long, in my opinion. Bobby Joe, I've been in the not guilty camp due to circumstantial BS, but bothered by the remoteness of Moselle. News Nation was on location Tuesday. You could throw a rock at the kennel from the road. Opportunity. Patrick Mott, I've had this opinion for a couple weeks now. I'm solidly confident AM is 100% involved in some way, but it hasn't been proven that he pulled the trigger. It's pretty close to where I am, Patrick. Actually, I go back and forth, but as far as I can get is that maybe he's involved or maybe he knows who did it. There's almost no way you could convince me that he actually pulled the trigger on Paul and Maggie himself, especially Paul. Like if he and Maggie had problems and you want to say he, snapped at her or something, but I really just can't see it. Cakes Boo, State reminded me of the totality and I find him guilty. Sky Ricky, Golf Magazine won't sponsor you. I probably tore up that chance, right? Sarah K, we now know that he was at the kennels and 15 minutes later he was leaving. Wouldn't he had told them when he was at the kennels he was leaving? Making the calls and text messages unneeded makes me wonder. I mean, I guess, or he just was like, I'm going back. I didn't want to come out here anyways. I'm getting sweaty again. Goes back and he's like, all right, I guess I got to go to my mom's now. Becky Sibley, I genuinely believe, and let's just remember, like when we hear him say Maggie didn't want to go see his mom's, it's not because she's a jerk. It's if you've ever had elderly people in your life that have suffered strokes or have dementia, it's hard sometimes to go see them. And that's why I give Alec a lot of credit that he was the one known to go over there all the time and deal with all this. It's really hard and heavy. And Maggie was probably really sad for her to go do that. And Alec probably wasn't like he was probably looking forward to hanging out with Paul, and messing around Moselle. That's why he bought it. And Paul loved that place. He was probably much more looking forward to that than going and sitting with his mom for 20 minutes when she, can't necessarily recognize him and stuff. That stuff is hard. Like, I just don't think it's all black and white. Becky Sibley, I genuinely believe he's guilty, but there's not enough hardcore evidence due to a shady investigation. This is a tragedy in itself. The investigation was so bad. I expect to hear a lot about it tomorrow. Trish C. Who wouldn't lie about the kennels? Spouse equals suspect. It's one way to look at it. Jay-Z, uncertainty and doubt. AM actually pulled the trigger. Have to vote not guilty. Side note, 8 Mile song, a go-to hype song. Waters didn't have a drop the mic moment. That's for sure. Kuda, if he can convincingly lie about something so small like the blue lights, he can lie about anything. I agree with you there. There's no doubt he's a liar. Lolly Bet. B, long-winded, but conscious of guilt. Point hit hard. Denise Porter, no evidence presented. She was running towards P. It's a good point, I guess. Maybe he took a little liberty with that, but it was compelling to me. K, I would run towards my trial even if it was an armed gunman going to kill me. Who wouldn't if it was their trial? I certainly would. Laura, I saw my BFF's mom and she said, do you watch The Lawyer You Know? I've seen your name. We were so excited and laughed about it. You're popular here in central Louisiana. That's wild. I've got some good friends in that area. That's so funny, though. Ashley, what do you think is the best and worst part for each side? Anything major you would do differently? Still not guilty. Thanks for all your coverage. Best channel. So I did the whole closing for the state. I think for the defense, the biggest, most important part is the horrible investigation. And now there are all these reasons and all these unknowns and all these variables because SLED did not do their job. And now we are here with no evidence, missing guns, missing clothes, missing everything. Alec never even had the opportunity to produce those clothes because they never asked him for them until months later or years later or whatever it is. And at that time, he was living here, there, and everywhere because his family was killed at this property, so he didn't want to go back. Pierre, I don't mind the common sense comment. At the end of the day, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. I agree with you there. Mo, I think due to your mock closing, I went in with high hopes. LOL, walked away disappointed. Even his team looked unimpressed. They did not look excited about it. Joanna, CW kneeling. Is that common behavior? Thank you, Peter. No, he did a lot of that. Kim Ripley, he's around law enforcement all the time. He had lights for years. Why didn't Ellie make him take them off? Or is that a big deal? But now making it a big deal. Yeah, they definitely knew it was there and didn't do anything about it. It's illegal around these parts, at least, to do that. So that's what I'm saying. I think a lot of people look the other way because Alec Murdaugh helped them either above the table or below the table, or under the table, I guess is what I'm looking for. But now he's a pariah. Nicholas, you don't have to read this out loud if you don't have the time. I did a mock closing. Would be fun to have it reviewed by a U.S. lawyer. Interesting. I will have to check that out. Robin, Peter, I disagree about Smalls. I think he lied. I think he told AM yes, but would look bad if he admitted that on the stand. Good old boy system. Interesting. Sandy B. Everyone was talking about how low the shots were. He didn't want bruising from the kicks of the guns. He thought about it a long time. I mean, I don't know. That's weird. Allison Hector, as a lawyer and legal tech, lack of in case crazy C-. So the lack of legal technology, I think. Oh, you're going at the PowerPoint. I hear you. Katie, your mock closing made me think, but Waters didn't. And that was the problem about it being a little long and convoluted, I thought. Jamie, AM avid hunter, yet 5 shots to MM all over the place. That's a good point. Is odd to me if AM didn't shoot. I think he knows who did and maybe can't say to protect Buster. Janet, it's so hard to wrap my brain around a father cold-bloodedly killing his son, and I think the defense is going to lean hard and use the word like butcher. Therefore, I needed the prosecution to convince me beyond a shadow of a doubt. That's a higher burden than they have. It's just a reasonable doubt that AM killed his son. Prosecution failed. Lord Zero, there's no proof Maggie ran towards Paul at all. Also, Waters said it's just as likely it was one shooter and had to pause after realizes oopsie. It's not good. It's not good. Terminal Ants. Have you ever had someone come to you and say they were being gang stalked? Just curious, not guilty. No. Kim D. I listened to the whole 8 hours and it was painful. I do not think it was effective. Thank you for all you do. Peter. Carsto. Defense is all evidence, i.e. no GSR, and AG's case is theory-based. In your opinion, do jurors favor proof over speculation? I know it's a tough call. It's not really that tough of a call. Usually jurors favor proof because then they don't feel like they're making a stretch. And when someone's life is on the line, they want to feel confident in their decision. They really do. Most juries try to do the right thing. Leslie D. If it's a hung jury, can the jury be polled? Yes. I mean, here they could. My kids. Just wish Creighton had said, and it was the little detective that put him at the kennels and brought down these lies. That would have been good. Normie, motive to kill Maggie could have been divorce. Yeah, but nobody testified that she wanted a divorce, even her sister and confidant. Lynn, now you're talking about the psychological profile of a jury. Dominance rules juries. After 6 weeks, those people are tired, may cave. Every jury I've ever spoken to, even focus groups, and a ton of jury research say the leaders lead. Janelle, I'm so sorry. Can you please explain reasonable doubt again? It has to be reasonable. It can't be crazy. It can't be, it can't be aliens came down and did this, right? But that it was 2 shooters versus 1, that could be a reasonable doubt. Michael Gray, Peter has the idea the Snapchat video is what drew the shooters to the scene. We've talked about that and how a lot of people would have actually known their location because of that Snapchat video. Welcome to the new members here. Econ and Danielle. Amy Jo, I expected to see denial, anger, bargaining in the 911 call body cam. He doesn't remember the last moments with them. The trauma social worker is perplexed. Jamie, if the chamber meeting about the jurors, can they be dismissed before deliberations? What can happen to D. Owen for lying to grand jury? I mean, that's frankly perjury, if you ask me. But if there is a juror that needs to be dismissed, I guess a lot of people were talking about chambers. I don't know. I did not pay attention to that. I don't know if they did talk about what that was, but they have, I believe, 1 extra alternate. So they could strike 1 juror if they feel like, they are not capable of doing the job appropriately. John, it's weird to think the prosecution could be making up facts and maybe lying to convict AM. Thoughts? Now who's lying? I don't think they're making up facts and lying. I think they absolutely believe he did it. The AG's office. Colby, Ben not guilty the entire time. They did not prove he did it. Hope Maggie and Paul get justice at some point. J. Michael, Ben floated. Has the idea the shooter saw the video been floated? So yes, it has. It has. Thank you, Glenn Davis. Esme, rolled my eyes when he spoke too much on the financial crimes. I get distracted very easily with speeches, but I was very much engaged. Still a C. JRA, withdraw on whatever. Text mom, found pills, slip of tongue. She told me to leave versus I was out of there. He snapped. Lori, too much reasonable doubt for my vote. The law is what we are required to follow. I keep thinking about a defendant who can't afford great attorneys. I know. I think about that literally all the time. It's tough. It's tough. That's the toughest part about our judicial system. Esme, oh my gosh, Peter, in case you didn't know, AM is a liar. That and the power that the prosecution has. Like, they should not have brought this case. Mara, ready for the Murdaugh name to be a distant memory. You, not guilty. They didn't convince me. Shabby investigation destroyed the case. Yes. And convict him of all the financial crimes. Put him away so nobody else has to deal with him or get screwed by him. Christy, he would have more problems from this, not less. Also, prosecution did not prove guilt. I agree. I don't see how this fixes the financial problems. Natalie, what do you think about Griffin doing closing tomorrow instead of Poot? I'm surprised. I think Poot is more engaging, but a lot of people don't like him. So maybe Griffin's got more of a ho-hum kind of like, you don't love him, you don't hate him, you're just kind of listen to what he says. Daria, at Sky Ricky, now we message Golf Magazine for sponsorships. Speaking of that, I was sent some golf apparel. I haven't asked them if they want me to like promote it or if I can get you guys like a discount or something, but whatever, it doesn't matter. They were nice, so I don't mind shouting them out. Rowback, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Rowback. They're a golf apparel company. They sent me a full box of shirts, like golf hoodies, quarter zips, golf pants, like golf joggers, and it's awesome. The quality is amazing. So I'm going to email them and see what's going on with that, but it's pretty sweet. John O'Reilly, so you can let him know. Let him know I complimented him if anybody wears golf apparel. Practicing law almost 50 years. Wow. I thought closing was brilliant. CW bridged disbelief that a husband-father would commit horrible acts to establish AM's fear of shame and reason. AM was consumed. Interesting. Good perspective there. Monique, I'm holding out that AM will show up wearing the missing clothes tomorrow. I mean, that would be amazing. The Bio Explorer. Sorry if I thought bad guys had just killed my family. I would have been more paranoid about that than the police. No way I'd lie to the police. That's a good point. Janae, still sticking with guilty, but the state is guilty of zero PowerPoint skills. And the investigation is guilty of not doing their best. At the very least, we can say that, Janae, I think. Taco. Each pellet of truth is not much on their own, but when they are all loaded into a shell and fired at once, they're deadly. I like what you did there, Taco. I like it. I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff, for wordplay, you know? Ryan, how many times are we going to hear about lying to the grand jury? Probably a lot. Lisa P. His story had to change once he realized he was on the video. You're thinking too much like a defense attorney. This man is guilty, but I love and appreciate your show. Thank you, Lisa. He was kneeling because he was tired, LOL, because he was going for so long. Lindsay, I just wanted to say, loved the mock closing earlier today. I'm a law student and really enjoyed learning and hearing your insights. Your clients are blessed to have such a great advocate in their corner. Thanks for the coverage. And over the last year, I'd say a lot of my new clients have come from YouTube, which is pretty cool to meet people and connect with people on here. And when they do need a lawyer for an injury case, they get in a car accident or something happens, and they call me. I mean, we've gotten horribly sad, wrongful death stories that we've been able to help people that literally came from YouTube, which is an amazing way to connect with people and be able to provide a service to them that, you know, I've dedicated my life to doing. So it's pretty cool. So thank you, Lindsay. Stephanie Wood, did you see the law and crime video today or current Moselle? What jury saw, Maggie's bike was still parked, Buster's flower plot, totally OJ'd up. Here's what I'm going to do. I don't have a ton of time, but let me go ahead and just put that on the screen as I answer these questions. I'm sure people are going to be like, oh, what's going on? It's like, we're not going to I'm not going to have the sound on. They just basically drive through. I'm going to turn the sound off. I'm going to play it, and we're going to do it on 2x speed. So anybody that wants to watch it can. And I'll leave it big on the screen. Do you guys like that? Leave it big on the screen, and I'll be small on the screen. Kelly, hi from Silicon Valley. I have to presume innocent until the state proves how AM committed the crime in 6-minute window of the timeline. Also, the state misrepresented the iPhone data. Need more proof. Enjoying your streams. But what about their iPhone expert about how you throw it and how it lands every time the same? I felt like Waters shifted motive, ego, shame. And I think that's actually a better one. That protecting the family name was more important than the money. Jennifer, a whole weekend of experimentally tossing a phone around, but no one felt the need to time a golf cart trip to and from the kennels or measure if you were holding the gun in the golf cart, like a lot of you said would be a plausible theory. Where would that measurement be? Would that fit in with the rest of your evidence? Why didn't you make those measurements? Why didn't you reconstruct the scene? Because your evidence doesn't actually fit or make sense. That's what I think. Grandma, guilty but hung jury. Great show. Lemon Perfect is in. Thank you, Jeanette. And for those of you wondering what's going on, we are playing The View. I guess some media went down to the scene and was able to see what the jury saw. So we're just playing that as we answer these questions. I keep thinking about the armpit coroner when he said the time of death between 8 and 10. So I put it at 9 and the prosecution jumped on it. That's why the defense called that guy. Remember way back AM couldn't kill his dog? Yes, I agree. I agree. And I believe that was testified to by a state's witness, right? People, it was not 8 hours long. It was not 8 hours long, but not 8 hours. Yeah, it's an 8-hour day. He definitely didn't take 8 hours. I think it was like 5 hours, maybe. SS, I know you have felt the state hasn't proven it beyond a reasonable doubt and therefore should be not guilty, but do you have a non-lawyer feeling guilty or not guilty? My non-lawyer feeling is telling me he did not pull these triggers. He did not. I don't think he would have been able to do that. Stealing, doing all this, whatever, but I don't know. Elaine, CW kept saying AM's motive was that he was about to be exposed in the financial crimes after being questioned that day, but at the same time, this was planned for a long time. Contradictory. I agree. It was not that he snapped. A lot of us are saying he snapped. That is not the state's theory. That could not work if that's the state's theory. These are the kennels where the dogs are kept. Why are people saying 8 hours? It was an 8-hour close. That's correct. It felt like 8 hours. That's probably why they did. Lord Zero. Keep in mind, Waters originally said Alex did it because the firm confronted him that morning. Now his theory is Alex planned it. Motive has changed. Yeah, but it's okay when the state does it. Heather, D- for Waters today. Maybe not guilty vote was sealed. My not guilty vote was sealed today because of him. Amanda, Peter, what's your favorite lemon perfect flavor? Because that's way more interesting than CW's closing today. Can't wait to see what JG brings. Right now, it's peach raspberry, which is what I'm drinking. Before it was a different flavor. I can't remember, but right now this is what I'm liking. It's got a lot of flavor to it. It's like a raspberry lemonade. Brit Flip, can SLED be held accountable for a bad investigation? Besides the embarrassment, I'm not really sure what else is going to be done to them. Jamie, CW talking about voice for PMMM, he failed. RW, yes, the motive they presented made no sense to me. Ramrod, Super Troopers, that's what this reminds me of. My grandfather's wife used to be Mark Ball's paralegal. That's wild. She knew AM and Mr. Randolph personally. She said AM is too soft, too chicken to have pulled the trigger. Awful human, but guilt not proven. It's very interesting that you said this and that she actually knows him because this is the vibes I'm getting too. Bev, we're a big Roback fam. Their Texas shirt is the jam. That's awesome, Bev. Should have known. That's awesome. Yeah, I love them too. Susan, did you see how close the kennel is to the road? Yes. Kathy Swanson, the girl that died on the boat's boyfriend told Paul he hopes he rots in hell. Maybe he thought he'd get away with it. Just saying. Pierre, AM was consumed. Good word for it. By the way, long-term thinking typically not a strong suit of addicts. That's a good point. Delasander, assume innocence to state must prove there is no 3. Jenin, did he save his children's life before killing his son? Oh, chicken. Sorry. Did he save the chicken's life before killing his son? That would be weird too. Kelly, Tinsley is the killer. Just think about it. No way. Needed recreations. Plus, if no phone flip, you must acquit. Thank you, Sammy. Molly, the shirt is hanging in the gunroom window today. No way. I mean, I haven't been watching this video closely enough to say that you're wrong, but that would be why. I think some more people would have picked up on that, maybe. I don't know. Aaron, are there any laws against twisting facts or misrepresented evidence in closing arguments? So it would be an ethical violation if you actually did misrepresent it. But if you believe, that's the point, is these vagaries, if you believe that's what the text message meant, that he was talking about his family, just to give one example, then that's okay. If they were to continue to say now there was blood spatter on the shirt, I think that would be a different problem because that's been disproven. Lynn, okay, a couple of us are wondering what happened that Paul left something set this in motion, Creighton didn't pursue. Okay, a couple of us are wondering what happened that Paul left something set this in motion and Creighton didn't pursue. I'm not sure what that means. Believing in SC and Jennifer and Sherry, new members, welcome. Jordan, Peter, FYI, I'm a witness of a witness. 1,000 milligrams of opioids is not lethal considering the amount of time AM was taking them. And he's a pretty large dude. I think that has something to do with it as well. It's a beautiful looking house, right? Candace, do you think the visit to Moselle was a good idea by the defense? It was eye-opening to see how close they were. Think it may have helped the state more. I have no idea. It depends on what the jury thinks, you know. If they were closer together, though, they had an expert say that you couldn't hear the gunshots, right? So if they were closer together, that would have been a positive for the state, except for that expert testimony. But if they were closer together, it's also better for Alec Murdaugh to say he could have gotten back to the house quicker. So I think it really could have cut both ways, a number of different ways. Jill and Taylor, in your opinion, who is the best lawyer in this case and why? You guys are not going to like my answer. I think it depends. It depends on what you're looking for and what you want. If I was going to hire a defense lawyer out of this group to be a bulldog for me, it would be Harpoolian. Esme, can't you wait for this trial to be over? I am ready. I, for one, am ready. The Bio Explorer, after all the crap he went through that day, maybe he had drugged up courage. I actually think, though, the one that was second to him would be the guy that did the cell phone stuff. I think he's been really good, too. I can't remember his name. After all the crap he went through that day, maybe he had drugged up courage, but since they didn't treat him like any other suspect, we'll never know. Leslie D., one of the beginning lines was that it was an exhaustive investigation, which we know it wasn't. I don't think prosecution thinks he's guilty. It's kind of like when people were getting on to Alex lawyers for Harpoolian for saying we're honored to represent him. Just leave that out and leave out the fact that it was an exhaustive investigation, because I don't like for people to insult my intelligence, and I'm positive you don't need to be a lawyer to know that was not an exhaustive investigation. Thank you, Mr. Zeus. Mary, SLED and FBI should have had the septic tank emptied, perfect place to dispose of guns, etc., or at least search the drains and around there, right? To see if blood went down them. They didn't even do that. You think they're going to dig up the septic tank? Jen D, have to hear defense's case, but I think AM knew it was happening, found CW believable on murder reenactment timelines, over the financials and lying, don't care for AM attorneys, good to see the property. Stephanie L, is it possible law enforcement, the prosecution muddled the investigation and trial on purpose? I don't think so. I mean, obviously it's possible. Seems odd they would pursue this crime before the financial crimes. Maybe he knows the real killers, but is afraid of retaliation if he gives them up because he will be in prison with them for the financial crimes, Mr. Zeus. Dawn, being a liar and a thief doesn't make you a killer. The state didn't prove enough proof for murder. Terry Wright says the chicken died. Sad. Thank you, Lisa. Susan, interesting. All Paul's friends turned on him on Netflix. Appears there's enough anger, bitterness for someone other than AM to be involved. He's a scumbag, but he had help with the murders. Yeah, I haven't watched that documentary yet, and I am waiting until after this is done, but I will give my reaction and what I think and how I would think. It's interesting that a lot of that did not come into this trial, apparently, because people have very strong thoughts. A ton of people in my office now are coming up to me, talking to me about this case, telling me what they think, and we've been discussing it, and there's not a consensus, even in my office. We have some people that used to work at the state attorney's office that work at our office as well. Some of them may be on the guilty side, and some other people may be on the not guilty side. It's an interesting conversation as well. I thought I saw a shirt as well. Spooky. Patrick, Barber, by far the best. He's been great every time. He is really good, actually. He is. And I wish we would have seen more of him, frankly. Welcome, Tahiti. Monsters of Rock. When they make Night at the Roxbury 2, will you play Richard Grieco? Sure. I love that movie. Right? You, him, me, him. Jamie H. Why would he take the phone and toss it so close to home, but not pull the battery or take PM's phone? PM's phone is in the back pocket, so easily seen. If it was AM, not guilty. I agree. Did he know all the data was coming out? Does he know how to put together these cases? And if he did, why would he take her phone and throw it half a mile up the road? Doesn't make sense. Welcome, Haynes. Laura, we are covering Valo Daybell, right? We have been. The last couple of videos haven't gotten as much interest, so I don't know if people on the channel have lost interest. So if you do want that, let me know in the comments and, go watch those videos and like those videos. And, if people are interested, then I'm going to do it. I mean, that's what it comes down to for the content on this channel. It's how it always has been. It's always how it always will be. Allison, AM plus sheriff indicted for drug trafficking. Everybody around. The Russell Lafitte guy's already been convicted. Keely, okay. It does look like that shirt is in the window. Somebody's going to have to send me a screenshot of that because I wasn't paying attention because I was reading questions. Caffeine, Cats, and Crime. There is a shirt in the side of the window of the video you are playing. Not sure if it's the shirt, but definitely a shirt in the side window. Well, follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and somebody send me that shirt in my DMs. We have 11,000 people in the chat, so we should be able to get to 10,000 likes again. So hit that like button if you're still here. Thank you, Jesse Sue, for this super sticker. And we've got a lot more to go over. We've got the defense's closing argument, and then the state gets to rebut that. So they shouldn't repeat anything we've already heard, but they will be able to respond to everything the defense says. So when the defense is closing, they have to do it at the same time. They've got to rebut and respond to everything the state said. And then they also have to put their argument out there to the jury. People are telling me it's Jim Griffin. It's kind of surprising to me. They wanted to split it. They didn't end up splitting it. Harpoolian was making it seem like it was going to be really hard to remember everything. Maybe he felt like it's just too much for him at this point. But to me, there's a lot left in this case, a lot more to discuss tomorrow, and we'll see if they get a verdict by the weekend. I appreciate all of you joining me every night for this. I'm going to miss it as well. I'm tired, so I'm going to enjoy the break. But I am going to miss hanging out with you guys, talking about who done it. And these conversations are always so enlightening and interesting. So I appreciate all of you guys so much that are here. Hit that like button and please subscribe. We're almost to 210,000 subscribers, and every little milestone we hit is awesome and makes it feel like, we're part of a success and continuing to grow, which is always really fun, a fun part of it. So I appreciate you guys. Hit that like button on your way out. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Tomorrow we have a Kohberger update. We talk about that search warrant from Pennsylvania. So if you're interested in that Kohberger case, make sure you subscribe and hit that reminder bell so you don't miss that video tomorrow. I don't know what time yet we're going to play it. Maybe at lunchtime. All right. I'm out of here. Peace.